You've heard this advice 100 times. Stop buying coffee, cancel the little subscriptions, skip the daily snack, and you'll magically become rich. It sounds reasonable. It's also, for most people, close to useless, and in some cases, it actively makes things worse. Today I want to break down why this advice is so popular, why the math behind it doesn't hold up the way you'd think, and what actually deserves your attention instead. Let's start with where this idea even comes from. The logic is simple and, on the surface, kind of satisfying. Small purchases add up over time, so cutting them out should add up too. A $5 coffee every weekday is over $100 a month. Stretch that out over a decade with some imagined investment growth, and you get these dramatic charts showing how skipping coffee could have made you a small fortune. It's a clean story. It's also a misleading one. It also survives because it's easy to sell. A headline like, "Cut this one purchase and retire early," is simple, visual, and makes for a great chart. Advice about refinancing debt or negotiating rent doesn't compress into a single dramatic graphic nearly as well, even though it matters far more. So the small, visual, guilt-inducing version of the advice keeps circulating, not because it's the most useful, but because it's the most shareable. Here's the first problem. The math almost never scales the way the story implies. Even a genuinely aggressive version of cutting small purchases, coffee, snacks, the occasional impulse buy, usually frees up somewhere between $100 and $300 a month for most people. That's not nothing. But compare that to the categories that actually dominate a typical budget: housing, transportation, and debt payments. Those three alone usually account for the majority of what most people spend every month. If your housing cost is a few $100s more than it needs to be, or your car payment is higher than it should be, or you're carrying high-interest debt, those single decisions can dwarf years of coffee cutting in a single month. The small stuff isn't irrelevant, but it's genuinely tiny compared to the big levers sitting right next to it, mostly untouched, because they're harder to talk about in a punchy video. Here's the second problem, and it's less about math and more about attention. Every hour spent agonizing over a coffee purchase is an hour not spent thinking about the decisions that would actually move the needle. This is where the advice does real damage, not because cutting a $5 purchase is bad, but because it trains people to believe that the solution to their financial situation is found in small, painful acts of self-denial, rather than in the handful of bigger decisions that carry far more weight. Someone who spends months feeling guilty about coffee, while never once comparing insurance rates, negotiating a bill, or looking at whether their housing situation actually fits their income, has spent all of that effort in exactly the wrong place. Here's the third problem, and this one is psychological rather than mathematical. Constant self-denial on small, low-stakes pleasures is exhausting, and exhausting habits don't tend to last. Telling yourself no to every small coffee, every little treat, every minor convenience, works for a while through sheer willpower, and then it doesn't, because willpower is a limited resource, not an infinite one. What usually happens next is a rebound. Weeks of restriction followed by a burst of spending that undoes most of the progress, often on things bigger than the coffee that started it all. A budget that depends on constant, low-level suffering isn't a sustainable plan. It's a countdown to burnout. Let's put actual numbers next to this, just to make it concrete. Say cutting coffee saves you a fairly aggressive $120 a month. That's real money, and over a year it adds up to about $1,400, which is nothing to dismiss. Now compare that to something like refinancing a car loan into a lower rate, negotiating your rent at renewal, or paying off a credit card balance that's been sitting there accumulating interest. Any one of those single decisions can easily be worth 2, 3, sometimes 5 times as much in a single year as the coffee cutting. And unlike the coffee, they don't require ongoing daily willpower to maintain. You make the decision once, and the benefit keeps showing up every month afterward without you having to think about it again. That's the real contrast. One path requires constant, repeated self-denial for a modest return. The other requires one deliberate decision for a return that's often several times larger, and keeps paying off without any extra effort. So if the small stuff isn't the real lever, what is? 3 places are worth far more of your attention than your coffee order. The first is housing. For most people, this is the single largest line item in their entire budget, which means even a small percentage difference here is worth more than cutting dozens of small purchases combined. That doesn't mean you need to move tomorrow. It might mean getting a roommate for a while, negotiating a renewal, or simply being deliberate about not upgrading your space every time your income goes up. The second is transportation. Car payments, insurance, and financing terms vary wildly, and a lot of people are paying meaningfully more here than they need to, often because of financing choices made under pressure at a dealership rather than a calm comparison beforehand. This is a category where a single better decision can be worth years of coffee. The third is debt, specifically anything with a high interest rate. Money spent on interest is money that produces nothing for you in return. It's pure cost, and it compounds the longer a balance sits there. If you're carrying a balance while also stressing over $5 purchases, the math is telling you very clearly where your attention should actually go. There's a fourth lever worth mentioning too, and it's the one this kind of advice almost never talks about: increasing what you earn. Cutting expenses has a hard floor. At some point there's nothing left to cut. Growing your income doesn't have that same ceiling. A single conversation about a raise, a certification that opens up a higher paying role, or a side project that adds even a modest amount of monthly income can outperform years of small cuts, because it doesn't require you to give anything up to get it. This isn't a knock on frugality. Being mindful of spending is genuinely useful. It's just that most personal finance advice spends all its energy on the cutting side of the equation and almost none on the growing side, even though growing your income is often the more powerful and more sustainable lever of the two. Putting this into practice doesn't require a dramatic overhaul. Pick one of the 4 levers: housing, transportation, debt, or income, and spend 30 minutes actually looking at it. Check your current rate, compare it against what's currently available, or just calculate what a realistic payoff timeline looks like. That 30 minutes, done once, is likely to be worth more than months of skipping coffee, and you only have to do it once to start seeing the benefit. Do that once a quarter, and you've built a habit that actually compounds, instead of one that just asks you to feel bad about a $5 cup of coffee. If this changed how you think about the advice you've been given, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around pointing at what actually works instead of what just sounds good in a headline. None of this means small purchases don't matter at all, or that awareness of your spending is a bad thing. We've talked before about why actually knowing your numbers matters, and that includes the small stuff too. The difference is proportion. Being aware of where your money goes is useful. Believing that cutting coffee is the primary lever for building wealth is not. One is a habit of awareness. The other is a distraction dressed up as a solution. If you enjoy your coffee and it fits comfortably in your budget, there's no moral case against it. The goal was never to make you feel guilty about small pleasures. It was to point your attention toward the handful of decisions that actually carry enough weight to change your financial trajectory, and to stop letting a $5 symbol stand in for the real conversation that most budgeting advice conveniently skips.